Good evening. Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to apologize for the late start to our meeting. We had two executive sessions that ran over, but my apologies. The board meeting of the Board of Education for January 21st, 2020 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV services website. Welcome. Tonight we'll be voting on a resolution to recognize February as Black History Month. Director DePass will be introducing this proclamation on behalf of the board. Thank you, Director DePass. This proclamation encourages our school communities to recognize this important month with appropriate curriculum, lessons, and activities. Superintendent, would you like to share how we'll be supporting schools and educators this month?
Yes, so I'm going to introduce...
Excuse me 1 second, Director DePass. I think the superintendent wants to ask Dr. Valentino to share some thoughts about activities in our schools this week before we do our proclamation.
Okay. Good evening, directors. Thank you for taking up this proposed proclamation, which aims to celebrate and affirm many of our students during this Black History Month. And I think it's important that we support our school communities and our educators in that effort. So I want to invite our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Luis Valentino, up to share some of the ways that we want to make sure and make those instructional resources and guidance available to our teachers. Dr. Valentino. What our Chief Academic Officer would share with the board.
We can ask Director DePass to read the proclamation, and then perhaps Dr. Valentino will be with us by that point.
Okay, so, excuse me, so I'm going to just read the proclamation in recognition of, there's two proclamations actually coming. One's for the Black Lives Matter Week of Action. I'll start with that one. The Black Lives Matter School Week of Action is a national movement of educators, administrators, and scholars that have come together to proclaim an annual week of action, affirmation, and solidarity to be called Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. The annual Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action will take place during the month of February this year to coincide and augment Black History Month, starting February 3rd and running through February 7th. Schools should be the places for the practice of racial equity, for the building of understanding, for the active engagement of all in creating pathways to freedom and justice for all people. Schools have the potential to make positive and tangible social change in the world while empowering students to be stewards of their communities, their classrooms, their campuses, and each other. Portland Public Schools is committed to academic excellence and personal success for all students. Central to this commitment is racial equity and social justice to prepare every student to navigate and compete in a culturally rich society. Our nation's future well-being relies on a high-quality public education system that confronts systemic bias, institutionalized racism, and leads the effort in ensuring that African American Black students and families thrive on the campuses that serve them. This social movement has raised awareness about injustices that exist at the intersections of race, class, gender, including mass incarceration, school-to-prison pipeline, poverty, unaffordable housing, income inequality, and poor access to health care. This district has considerable opportunity through its decision-making power to improve the educational experience for all students, specifically African American or Black students. There's tremendous opportunity to teach all students about social justice, lead for racial equity, integrate culturally responsive practices in curriculum, and support students to become leaders in making their own schools a safer and more inclusive learning environment. The Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action is intended to highlight, uplift, and affirm the rich history and contributions of the Black community to cultivate African American Black students a sense of pride, self-worth, and self-love. The purpose of the week will be to spark an ongoing movement of critical reflection and honest conversations in the school communities for people of all ages to engage with issues of social justice. School Board Policy number 2.10.010-P states that rather than perpetuating disparities, Portland Public Schools must address and overcome this inequity and institutional racism, providing all students with the support and opportunity to succeed. Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action may offer a variety of educational opportunities such as workshops, panel discussions, cultural events, instructional activities, and expressions of unity. The Oregon Education Association and the National Education Association have both voted to support the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. So be it resolved.
The board will now vote on resolution number 6040, resolution to recognize Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. Do I have a motion? Director Brim Edwards moves, and Director Bailey seconds the motion to adopt resolution 6040. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on resolution 6040?
Yes. We have Alicia Blackford and Nicole Watson.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good evening. I'll go first. So my name is Nicole Watson, and I am a 4th and sometimes 5th grade teacher at Rosa Parks Elementary. However, this year I'm on full-time work release to move forward our racial equity work within PAT. Tonight I am here to speak about the importance of resolutions like Black Lives Matter at School's Week of Action. I remember being a 5th grade teacher at Jason Lee when it was a K-8 school. I remember my administrator, who's here tonight, Isaac Cardona, fully supporting a bright idea that I and a fellow teacher had about celebrating BLM and Black History Month. We were nervous, but we knew that with collective action we could do all things together. And we did it. We had an assembly, we painted the walls with inspiring quotes, which I think I got in trouble for. We posted artwork on and every teacher engaged in a lesson by teaching about a Black leader or movement, and it was powerful. This was my first lesson in understanding support, buy-in, and collective power. And that's exactly what we're doing here tonight. Tonight, our board of directors and our district are saying that we support, we are all in, and we are part of your collective power that is brave enough to teach the hard stuff. We're brave enough to engage in critical dialogue. We're brave enough to speak up even when we're afraid. We're brave enough to do it together because we not only believe that Black Lives Matter, but we specifically believe in them mattering on the campuses that serve as an incubator for their genius. What's powerful about this experience is working together with Director DePass on the development of this resolution. I want to thank you for your leadership and your guidance. And I want to shout out and commend every educator who has braved the space alone and every educator who sits on the Black Lives Matter committee at Portland Association of Teachers. You don't have to give up your Wednesday evenings, but you do. You don't have to design lessons that are culturally responsive, but you do. You don't have to attend events that deepen your practice, but you do, and you have. And tonight is about the work that you've put in behind the scenes, building a path where one did not exist before. This is the definition of revolutionary. This resolution is more than just words on paper. It is an acknowledgement of our Black students, families, and communities, and it is a statement that their experience on our campuses and in our cities matter. One of my favorite quotes is from activist Lila Watson, and says that if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And it sure feels good to work together. On Monday, February 3rd, we are inviting every educator to wear a Black Lives Matter shirt and take a selfie, because that's important, using the BLM hashtag. On Wednesday, February 5th, we are engaged in a Hoodies Up at Roosevelt High School event led by one of our teachers, Moe Yonamine. On Thursday, February 6th, we are having a student panel that is in support of building and supporting BSUs and student affinity groups. And on Friday, February 7th, we are showing a short film called Another Day at Da Vinci Middle School in celebration of students who are Black on predominantly white campuses. For more information, you can visit our website, pdxteachers.org, just to find out where we are and what we're doing. We're excited to work together. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to also thank PAT and you specifically, Nicole, for bringing this to my attention, to collaborating. I mean, it's been good. Comment that the t-shirts are awesome. really nice. I can see them from here without glasses, but
We
they're
have extra
they're very
shirts.
nice.
We have extra shirts, Director
And
Bailey.
I'm happy to wear one if I could get one to wear. But anyway, thank you it's been great collaborating with you and with PAT.
Hello, I'm Alicia Blackford, and I'm here to ask you to recognize the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. I teach English language development at Madison, where our staff does not reflect the racial diversity of our student population. The district, my colleagues, and I have to work actively every day to give our Black and brown students, and by extension all students, the education they deserve. The most basic piece of that education is an education they see themselves humanized in. Our staff did affinity group interviews with Madison students of color, and they overwhelmingly, over and over, said what they needed from their teachers was to be seen and respected in the classroom and to see themselves in the curriculum. Every student, regardless of race, needs to see the struggles, victories, creativity, and humanity of Black folks. School board policy states that, quote, rather than perpetuating disparities, Portland Public Schools must address and overcome this inequity and institutional racism, providing all students with the support and opportunity to succeed. That statement is where it's at. Address and overcome this inequity and institutional racism. Y'all said that. Thank you. That is the work. That is the work that so many of us are trying to figure out how to do in isolation, and that is why this resolution matters. At Madison, BLM at School Week of Action started 3 years ago as a small group of teachers trying to put together resources and convince our colleagues to use them. I made a one-off Spanish lesson and an activity for biology class, not exactly my wheelhouse. Now, thanks to the work at the national level and the leadership of Black educators like Nicole, I'm able to work with colleagues from across the district and within the community to gather resources, plan events, and support my fellow teachers in truly integrating the Black experience into our curriculum. This resolution will help us as educators move this work from individual to collective action. It will allow those who want to engage their classrooms in this difficult work feel safe to do so, and show those that haven't begun this work that it is imperative. It asks each and every educator in this district to look at our roles as contributors to racial inequities and the school-to-prison pipeline, and to take personal and collective action. So many students graduate from high school only knowing simplified versions of MLK, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, and that is a disservice and an erasure. This resolution calls on all educators to teach Black history, Black lives, and the Black experience, not just for a week or a month, but all year. By passing and disseminating this resolution, you will be fostering this crucial work not just at Madison, but at every school in PPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any other public testimony on this item?
No.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have the motion on the table. Superintendent will vote on this, and then if you'd like to invite Dr. Valentino to share some of the activities, that would be great. Is there any further board discussion on this item?
I just wanted to call out, I know last year, PAT, I want to recognize that they asked us to do this and we weren't quite able to get it over the finish line. So I really want to thank PAT for persisting and coming back because I think we have a really powerful set of resolutions tonight that we're going to vote on. So thank you for not giving up when it didn't work last year, and working with our process and with us to allow this to happen, because I think having separate resolutions, this one really makes it real in our classrooms and in our schools. So thanks to the leadership and everybody for coming tonight, because I think it sends a powerful message to be supporting both of the resolutions we have before us.
Hear, hear. Thank you to our partners at PAT and Director DePass for leading the board effort on this as well. The board will now vote on Resolution 6040, which resolves that Portland Public School District welcomes the participation of educators, staff, and students in community-based activities and events related to the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action to be held the first week of February, beginning with February 3rd through 7th. Portland Public School District invites educators across all grade levels and content areas to use resources that are inclusive of all of our diverse learners to enrich instruction throughout the entire year, not just 1 week or 1 month. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes. Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6040 in recognition of the Black Lives Matter Week of Action is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Latterell voting.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So before we move on to our Black History Month proclamation, would you like to
Yes,
invite?
Chair. I also want to appreciate our educators for taking leadership on behalf of other educators to ensure that they have the instructional resources, the guidance, support, and planning appropriate activities that celebrate Black excellence in our school system. Hopefully, complementing that effort are our own teaching and learning departments. Effort. So if I could invite our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Luis Valentino, to talk a little bit also about some of the additional ways we want to make sure that folks have resources available to them, and also more importantly to start to inventory the various activities that will happen throughout the course of the month. Dr. Valentino?
Thank you. Good evening, Board Chair Constam, Superintendent Guerrero, board members. The resolution that you've just voted on is very powerful, and it really speaks to the vision, the emerging vision that we all share for PPS in support of each one of our students. One of the things that we want to highlight from the Office of Teaching and Learning is that when we talk about how do we support students of color, particularly African American and Native American students, is that we don't do it month by month or day by day, but that we think about this across the entire year. And so what you have voted on today really speaks to the commitment to that and how we can partner in that moving forward. And so the words that were also shared by the public speakers this evening really surfaces how our communities are taking action to address that as well. And so that gives us the opportunity to partner with them as well is in moving forward an agenda that really looks at how do we address the needs of all of our students in PPS with a very special and particular lens towards equity, access, and inclusiveness. And more importantly, a racial justice agenda leading that. And so in support of that, in the Office of Teaching and Learning, for us, it's been about curating the resources that will help teachers and principals at school sites to begin that dialogue at their own school, but also begin to build voice in themselves and in the students they serve, so that these conversations then become all of our conversations. And so the resources that we are curating that we will share with you subsequently in an update will be made available via our regional superintendent newsletter on the 24th. And soon after, those resources that are being curated will be part of the teacher communique that will be going out so that they have it ready in preparation for February in the planning for their instruction. And so what I wanted to just briefly share with you, just an example of the material that is being curated. And so once we complete that, we will make it available to you as well, so that you know what we have been working on. An important piece of this is a lot of the resources that have been created from here have become part of our guaranteed and viable curriculum, unit, and lesson plan to make sure that they get embedded and that they become part of the teaching and learning that goes on a daily basis in the system. This will be followed by professional development that also begins to align those resources to the practices that create a more inclusive environment and addresses the issues of equity in classrooms and across schools. So that's where we are with that. And so what I would like to do, though, is within the week to update you with a completed list. One thing, we're also working closely with the Office of School Performance, and they actually have sent out a survey so that we can all find out what schools are doing individually. That survey will then also be compiled and it'll be put together along with our data to be shared with you about the work that we're going to be doing in support of our schools. Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Superintendent, perhaps in your superintendent's report in February, you can share with us some anecdotes about these activities.
Just a quick question. Are we doing anything with the 1619 project? The New York Times.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we began that process, and then what we didn't want to do was to keep it in isolation, but to begin to integrate it. So a charge given to some of the members of the team was to please listen to the entire podcast, and then see how it becomes part of the work that we are trying to do. So it won't be called out as a 1619 project, but the elements described in there will become part of the curriculum that we're going to be developing. Okay. And so I will make sure to sort of highlight that so that you can see where that exists and what we're trying to do. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Valentino. Director DePass, do you have a comment, Director Bailey?
Are we also, when you say across the board in terms of injecting equity into our work, does that include the math curriculum?
Yes, and in fact, and the science curriculum, and in fact, highlight, so yes to the math, but also to the science. And in fact, Dr. Davis, who is here, can speak to the fact that attention has been given by school districts across the country who want to use our science curriculum because it was centered around equity. So it builds out from equity as a concept and embeds the science around it. So we're becoming much more mindful and thoughtful about how we do that so that it is sustainable.
Great.
Thank you.
Director DePass, would you like to bring forward our next proclamation in honor of
Sure.
February as Black History Month?
So we all know that February is Black History Month, but we might not all know that Black History Month began in 1915, about a half a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. It was the creation of noted historian Carter Woodson and other prominent African Americans. A precursor of the Civil Rights Movement, Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by Black Americans, a time for recognizing the central role of members of the African diaspora in U.S. history. The contributions of the members of the African diaspora throughout history have made memorable and important impacts in the U.S. as artists, scientists, educators, entrepreneurs, influential thinkers, faith leaders, athletes, and political and government leaders, and reflect the greatness of the United States. Black history reflects a determined spirit of perseverance and cultural pride in its people's struggle to equitably share in the opportunities of a nation founded upon slavery as an economic driver, squaring with the values of freedom and justice for all. Members of the African diaspora have participated in every effort to secure, protect, and advance the cause of freedom and civil rights, and continue to resist white supremacy. The local community has enriched the diversity of perspective and experience in our district, and the Board of Education desires to recognize and honor the achievements and contributions of members of the African diaspora. Our history curriculum must reflect the lived experiences of people of different racial, religious, and ethnic groups and Black Americans. And all students need an opportunity to understand the common humanity underlying all people, to develop pride in their own cultural identity and heritage, and to respect and accept the identity and heritage of others.
Thank you. The board will now vote on resolution number 6039, proclamation and recognition of February as Black History Month. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves and Director Moore seconds the motion to adopt resolution 6039. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on resolution 6039?
No.
Is there any board discussion on this resolution? All right, the board will now vote on resolution 6039, which resolves that the Board of Education of Portland Public Schools hereby recognizes the month of February 2020 as Black History Month and encourages all educators to commemorate this occasion with appropriate ceremonies, instructional activities, and programs. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Resolution 6039 in honor of Black History Month is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Latterell voting
Yes.
all right. Great. We look forward to hearing about what's going on in all of our classrooms. Thanks, everybody. At this time, the board will vote on our business agenda. Board members, are there any items you would like to pull for discussion? If so, we'll set aside these items for discussion and vote at the end of the meeting.
Is the calendar, I'm looking at, I think, an old index. Is the calendar in the business agenda, or are we voting on it separately?
I don't think we're voting on it yet. I think it was just a draft.
Is it, it's,
The-
Yes, it's
Yes, the
item
calendar's in the business
6037
agenda.
in the business agenda.
so I don't want to pull it, but I just have a comment to make. That's all right?
Yeah, of course.
So I just wanted to thank the superintendent and the staff that worked on the calendar. I think it, once again, we're really in a rhythm of a student-focused calendar, and I think takes into consideration lots of issues that over the years parents had raised, and staff and students. So I think we're in our locked in on our third year, so I just wanted to thank you for creating a calendar that has more uninterrupted weeks of school, that starts earlier and provides greater flexibility in case we have bad weather.
Thank you, and directors will find the accompanying memo that outlines the criteria. It's always a little bit of a balancing act, and there's certainly differences of opinion, but I do want to appreciate on the staff side Daniel Kogan for coordinating a lot of our outreach with stakeholders as well as PAT leadership for working with us to make sure we balance the needs of our students with a calendar that makes sense for the academic school year, and we'll be working on the next iteration of our calendar for our employees next, but thank you.
Always anxiously awaited by our families. We do have one item, 6034, which will be pulled from the business agenda. This was a resolution regarding a complaint that we heard prior to this meeting that we will not be voting on tonight. So, well,
Both
that
of
we
those.
were going to vote in executive session. Ms. Bradshaw, are there any other changes to the business agenda?
No, I just wanted to note that the resolution 6037 with the calendar was posted this afternoon onto the website. It was
Okay.
added to them.
Great.
There's-
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director DePass moves and Director Scott seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment? Is there
No.
any board discussion
Yeah, I'm confused.
on?
6033 and 6034.
So 6034 has been pulled, which was the complaint that was slated to be voted on
Right.
in the business agenda, which we have put off. And then the other was scheduled to have been voted on in executive session because it pertained to personal records. And so it was not on the business agenda.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I guess I'm looking at the old agenda. Sorry, my bad.
I'm looking at the revised that also doesn't have. Oh, I see, yes.
6033 is not on the business agenda, is the short answer, correct, Director
thank you.
Constam?
Oh, yes, it is not on the.
6033 and 6034, neither are on the business agenda.
Wait,
Well, 6034 was, but it has been pulled. Everyone should have a revised business agenda.
Yeah, I think
There-
there's a version, we want to make sure you're looking at the second revised business agenda, and 6033 deals with
Off-campus
off-campus activities,
Right.
and it is part of the business agenda. 6034 is not.
Great.
And 6034 has been pulled. Are we all,
Thank you.
are we all straight on that? Okay, is there any board discussion on the business agenda now?
I just had one other comment. There's a, it's like Scribner correction on one of the, well, first of all, shout out to the board staff for getting through the backlog of board meeting minutes. But there is one of the, and I'll just submit it to the board officers, a date that refers to the long-range facilities plan being approved in 2018, and actually it's 2012. So,
Okay.
just a.
The board will now vote on resolutions 6031 through 6038, with the exception of 6034, which has been pulled. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? The business agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Latterell voting.
Oh my God. Yes.
All right, thank you. Before we begin the public comment period, I would like to review our guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments to us. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen without distraction from electronic devices. One quick reminder, any oversized signs need to be in the back foyer, and signs in the audience should not be held in a way that obstruct others' view of the meeting. Board members and the superintendent will not respond to comments or questions during public comment, but our board office will follow up on board-related issues raised during public testimony. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. We request that complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you please give them to Board Manager Roseanne Powell to distribute to us. Presenters will have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of your testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on, and when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time. We appreciate your input and thank you for your cooperation. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone signed up this evening for student or public comment?
We have a student signed up, Elliot Knopp.
Great. Welcome.
My name is Elliot Knopp, N-O-P-P. Hello, I'm a junior at Franklin High School here to talk to you about the climate justice and the importance of student engagement. I would like to start by thanking the board and the superintendent for all the effort you've made regarding climate justice this past year, such as hiring Nicole as the climate justice coordinator and allowing students to participate in the September 20th climate strike. The strike showed that there's a large body of students who are engaged and ready to fight for their future. Yet even with this large demonstration of student voice, I hardly ever see many students getting a significant say in the decisions at PPS. Climate change must be fought with outreach and organization, such as the creation of student groups with input in decision making. Last May, the board told students that they would invest in a quarterly student-led climate justice advocacy group. 8 months later, this group is still non-existent. Even if the group did exist, I would worry that no students would know about it because there is a similar group currently, the PPS Climate Justice Committee, that is open to students, yet I have been the only student voice at the last few meetings. I have talked with students and teachers at my school who are all oblivious to the fact that this group exists. When creating this group, we need more effective promotion in order to effectively engage a diverse range of students. The youth voice is a huge part of the climate justice movement, so making climate justice decisions without student input is frankly irresponsible. The youth voice is especially needed for the new high school climate justice elective being developed. Having students be a major part of the curriculum development would not only be an incredible learning opportunity for the youth, but also ensure that the course is engaging and effective to its audience, the students. The course is a great new opportunity to create something powerful that gets kids engaged in global problem solving. If we're going to build a course from scratch, let's do it right. With budget planning for next year only a few months away, I urge you to invest money and effort towards the new climate justice curriculum and guarantee that it is beneficial to both the students and the curriculum, and the community. I've seen so many climate justice lessons that have been scrapped together and have done nothing to motivate students. Let's make this one different. It is also crucial that we finally develop a PPS Youth Climate Justice Advocacy Group full of a diverse range of students from different schools. This group could help plan big events like the Youth Climate Justice Summit, which has been asked for repeatedly. This project needs a ton of outreach. Any student who has any interest in climate justice should be aware that it exists. I am hopeful that 2020 will be a year of action and cooperation between the board and students. The only way to work against climate change is together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have Mike Rosen for public comment.
Hi, I'm Mike Rosen, R-O-S-E-N.
Where you been?
Chair Constam, directors, and Superintendent Guerrero. I'm here tonight to testify on behalf of the Climate Justice Committee. We're a group of teachers, students, and community members that work on issues related to climate justice and education with PPS and other community-based organizations. Tonight, I'd like to discuss the district's resource conservation policy. It was first adopted in 1992 and then updated in 2002 and is now almost 20 years old. The policy required that the district develop and follow a resource conservation plan. To my knowledge, a plan was never developed. Nonetheless, the policy is so outdated, the opportunity presents itself to provide an update that has a climate justice focus. Board Resolution 5272, which passed unanimously in May 2016, states, quote, Portland Public Schools recognize that our schools must play a leadership role in modeling for students climate and environmentally friendly practices when it comes to building design, energy use, including use of solar panels, land use, waste disposal, and composting and recycling, end quote. Given this, we believe that the resource conservation policy should be renamed the Climate Crisis Response Policy and completely overhauled and rebuilt through a climate crisis justice lens. To facilitate this, a draft will be presented to the Board Policy Committee at their February 19th meeting. The draft will reflect input from district staff and students. In short, PPS has to dramatically reduce its carbon footprint and adhere to the targets laid out in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's October 2018 special report of 1.5 degrees Celsius. This will require that PPS reduce human-caused operational emissions of CO2 by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030 and to reach net zero by 2050. All aspects of PPS operations must be accounted for, including but not limited to transportation, building use, procurement, food handling, and new construction. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your comments. Please feel free to connect with Board Manager Roseanne Powell if you have something specifically you want to follow up with the board or the board office. All right, Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to provide your report?
Yes, indeed. I think we're trying a little different AV setup tonight, so we have the big screen behind you, but the monitor in front of you. Good evening, buenas tardes. Thank you, everybody. We're coming off that long weekend and a day of celebration and community building. As we proclaim and recognize February as Black History Month at PPS, I wanted to call folks' attention to some of the many events and activities where we had the opportunity to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. yesterday. This includes the celebration at the Highland Christian Center's 35th annual MLK Day event, where a number of our schools performed, including student groups from Sinton, Fabian, Beaumont, and Jefferson High. In addition, 7 current and former PPS educators and administrators also received Lifetime Achievement Awards. Congratulations. In addition, PPS was also a proud sponsor of the Scanner Foundation's 34th annual MLK Breakfast event. Thank you, directors, many of you for being present. In addition, there was a myriad of volunteer work that happened at numerous PPS schools like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Boise Elliott Elementary Schools. In addition, day of service activities included the packing of 700 backpack lunches at Scott Elementary to benefit students at Scott, Woodlawn, Rigler, and MLK Jr., students and families. We also had high schools involved, including Benson Tech, where they celebrated MLK Day with student panels and guest speakers. PPS employees participated in numerous other celebrations and activities across the city. You see here also an example of portraits of Dr. King created by our kindergartners at Grout Elementary. All of us are honored, humbled to honor the life and memory of Dr. King, and not just during this one special day. Our responsibility continues to be to ensure equitable opportunities and outcomes for our African American students and all of our students of color. That is our work every single day. In particular, during upcoming Black History Month, where our pledge is to ensure we're implementing a more robust effort to tell the stories of our Black students, educators, administrators, and trailblazers. So just a little bit of preview of some of the stories and vignettes we're going to try to capture over the next few weeks. You heard earlier our CAO share with the board and broader community some of the ways that we'll be doing our part to support educators with integrating activities and lessons, celebrating Black History Month, and continuing to build resource page, as well as capturing a calendar of scheduled events and activities so that our directors can continue to get out into our community. So as superintendent, I don't have the authority to pass any proclamations, but we're still in January, and that makes it School Board Recognition Month in Oregon and across the country. So a Recognition Month is really the least we as school district leaders can do to say thank you for your tireless hard work and dedication of our school boards. You'll note the portrait there from our summer camp experience dedicated to governance and leadership. For those that aren't aware, our board directors are unpaid volunteers who give hours and hours of their time to PPS. Their advocacy, governance, leadership, and community engagement are vital to our success as a district, and we appreciate their ambassadorship. So I would like to thank our directors, particularly for your lead role, most recently in initiating our visioning work with the community and for laying out clear performance goals for this administration. You bring an expertise that's historical, organizational, professional, parental. These are invaluable. Your commitment to and passion for public education and to our community is deeply appreciated by me, and I know my leadership team and everyone here in the district, so thank you. And speaking of leadership, I'm very pleased to now introduce our new Chief of Schools, Dr. Sean Bird, here at PPS. As he makes his way down, Sean is a passionate educator. He has more than 20 years of experience as a teacher, administrator, and executive leader in urban school districts. His hire completes Deputy Superintendent Cuellar's leadership team in the Office of School Performance, which Dr. Bird will now oversee. Dr. Bird will lead and guide our regional superintendents and our area senior directors, whose task is to support our principals and school communities each and every day. He will lead the development of professional learning and leadership strategies that will continue to promote collaboration and coherence across all teams. He will also help to manage the organization of academic and leadership structures and processes for the district. So most recently, Dr. Bird comes to us from the School District of Philadelphia, where he has served as their Chief Schools Officer since 2017. During his tenure, 164 schools increased their scores on the district school performance framework or scorecard, and 27 schools moved into the top tiers of that ranking. After starting his education career as a secondary English teacher in Houston, Texas, he served as a principal in the middle and high school levels. He then moved on into district leadership with the Los Angeles Unified School District, where he served as a lead instructional director, supervising principals, and was also served a tenure as chief academic officer of the Pasadena Unified School District in California. He has also served as an adjunct professor at the University of Houston, University of St. Thomas, and California State University, Dominguez Hills. We're extremely excited to have Sean join our leadership team at PPS, and as is tradition here, we'd like to give him a minute to say a few words.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Guerrero. Thank you so much. Today's my first day here. I've had a very warm welcome, and it's a long day, but I'm glad to be here. As Superintendent Guerrero said, I do come from the School District of Philadelphia. I'm very happy to be back on the West Coast, and particularly I'm very happy to be in Portland because I was drawn to this district really because of the work that you all are doing, or that now we are doing, in racial equity and social justice, and that has really been something that I have been following the trajectory of the work here. So that's really what attracted me to the district. So I look forward to spending the next couple of months getting to know our schools and our principals so that I can better serve them and support them, and of course getting to know our regional superintendents and area school directors, the team that I'll lead. So thank you again for the warm welcome, and thank you for your confidence in me to do the work. I look forward to a prosperous and long career here. Thank you.
Welcome to the Portland Public Schools, Dr. Bird.
Speaking of tradition, Superintendent, do you have a pin for Mr. Bird?
It just occurred to me that we didn't, we'll locate one before the end of the meeting. Roseanne? Here we go. Chair, do you want to do the honors? Sure. Dr. Bird?
I need a replacement, though.
Welcome. Glad to have you serving our students. Wear it with pride. Thank you so much.
This just shows the pipeline goes two ways with Philadelphia. Since we just lost our police chief to the city, welcome this way.
And lastly, just to bring us full circle, an important reminder from an educator and author that I admire, Dr. Zaretta Hammond. This is our charge. I really believe we're on a trajectory to show some substantive progress as a school system. I know that we will continue to keep central the developing of our relationships with our students, particularly our students of color, and those who historically haven't been effectively served. We have to understand who they really are. We need to ensure that our priorities, our approach, and our resources are really targeted and prioritized to best serve them. So it is through this full commitment by all of us that I think we're going to reduce and I think ultimately narrow and eliminate these disparities and these historical injustices experienced by, unfortunately, so many of our students. So we have much work to do, but I look forward to continuing on that challenge alongside all of you. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Student Representative Latterell, would you like to come up with a report on the fly regarding the many activities of the District Student Council?
I wrote one. It's really short, though, because it's really short. Announcing that we hired a student engagement officer. Yeah, and she's over here. She's awesome. Really excited that we have someone that's dedicated to all that I do and also what students do and focusing on getting into all those communities. Today at District Student Council, Dr. Brown came in, Dr. Russell Brown, and explained to us the process of the board goals and explained a lot of the concerns that we had around the post-secondary readiness goal, which was really useful, and explained the differences between the state standards and the school district standards. And then also Nicole came in and presented basically what we're going to see in a little bit. So I'm gonna save the comments and the questions that we all had for that later. And then also we're still working on the student summit plan. It's kind of complicated, and the Lincoln Health Center plan, which I'm also going to save my comments for until later, just to bring all the student perspective to that. That's it.
And we all wish you well with your finals. And we fully expect you to just slip away whenever you need to. Good luck with everything.
Yeah, finals aren't that bad for me this year. I'm really happy. But we do have state constitution competition this Saturday. If anyone's not doing anything on Saturday, come see your PPS schools. It's state constitution team competition.
And do you know which of our PPS schools will be at the state?
It's Franklin, Lincoln, Grant, and Cleveland, I believe.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Super exciting.
All right. Superintendent, would you like to introduce our next item, which is the calendar year 2020 through 2023 agreement between Service Employees International Union and Portland Public Schools?
You threw us off when you said calendar. I thought we were doing a do-over.
Oh, no.
Mulligan. These are one of those moments that are always a pleasure to bring forth to the board. I'd like to invite Sharon Reese, our Chief Schools Officer, and her accomplice, Dan Rowan. What did I say? I'm still on the last agenda item. Chief of Human Resources. It was a long day, sunrise flight. Because we have a contract ratification we're hoping for this evening. So I'll let our Ms. Reese talk to us about highlights of our work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening. When you think about food and shelter, that features pretty prominently in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So our Service Employees International Union represents 509 highly valued nutritional services and custodial employees in our district. These are critical services that they provide. We literally could not serve students without this group of employees. So I'm particularly pleased to bring this tentative agreement with our SEIU partners forward to you this evening. I believe that this agreement is further tangible proof that when we demonstrate respect, collaboration, build relational trust, we can best serve the needs of our students through providing working conditions that attract and support and retain great employees. That has been the approach of our superintendent, our leadership team, the HR team, and certainly my approach since stepping into the chief of HR role. While I wasn't at the table myself during this negotiation, the reports that I received from our bargaining team reinforced that collaborative approach again, and I want to thank the bargaining teams for their work. I also want to introduce you to someone who was actually at the table. Sitting to my right, your left, is Dan Rowan. Dan is a co-founder of CDR Labor Law. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Excellent. He has represented Portland Public Schools throughout this negotiation process. He was the specific choice of our former senior director, Carol Hawkins, and he's provided critical support to our employee and labor relations team and function for years, not the least of which is supporting the very large lift of the last 5 collective bargaining agreements that we've put in front of you in the last 6 to 7 months. Just a lot of work. So Dan is here to provide some highlights of the contract before you, and we'll take questions as you have them.
I'd like to say thank you to the board and the community for allowing me this opportunity to be here with you today. I echo a lot of Sharon's comments that this agreement was a mutual effort, that a lot of hard work went in by both bargaining teams. I think it reflects our common interests and how to get those common interests into sustainable and viable contract language. The negotiations, the tenor at the table was professional and productive. The dialogue across the table was excellent as far as being respectful, but also talking nuts and bolts about the things that we needed to change in the contract to meet the common interests. I think that's attributable to the strong relationships between district leadership at the table and the employees on the union's bargaining team, SEIU's bargaining team. I thought it was remarkable that the union employees at the table, most of them had over 20 years of experience, so a lot of institutional knowledge that was very helpful in problem solving together. I think a lot of credit also goes to Senior Director of Nutrition Services, Whitney Ellersick, and Senior Manager of Facilities, Frank Leavitt, for the relationships that they've built in their time with the district. There was obviously a lot of trust that went into the give and take at the bargaining table. So again, I'd like to just emphasize the positive nature of the negotiations. One of the main issues we focused on was how to retain valuable staff and attract quality candidates and applicants to open positions. And that was one of the primary factors driving the agreement on wages, which I think addresses those concerns by providing robust wage increases through all 3 years of the contract. We also addressed some legal compliance issues, and the other major component was insurance. There were some necessary changes to the existing language in the contract around insurance, and providing health care benefits is obviously a very high priority for the district. We were able to meet the interests of the district in a fiscally responsible and sustainable benefits that were also of the quality and the nature that the employees have come to expect. So again, very successful there. We believe, and on behalf of the district's bargaining team, we believe this is a fair contract and it has our full endorsement and support.
Board will now vote on resolution number 6041, 2023 agreement between SEIU and School District 1J, Multnomah County, Oregon. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves and Director DePass seconds the motion to adopt resolution 6041. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on this?
No.
Is there any board discussion on this resolution? I would just add, again, through all of our conversations during these negotiations and the direction that the board has provided, it's been so gratifying to see the really collaborative approach and to arrive at this satisfactory solution to all. I think it continues this incredibly positive trend of really much improved labor relations in this district that really makes a difference in the everyday lives of our employees who are serving our students. So thank you for doing the yeoman's work of working through all the details that are so important to our employees, and it's a privilege to be able to bring this forward. Any other discussion? All right, the board will now vote on resolution 6041. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Resolution 6041 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Lattarell voting
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our friends in SEIU. Thank you for everything you do for our kids every day. We are excited tonight to hear an update on Resolution 5272, which called for the integration of climate change and climate justice into the curriculum of all our schools. The resolution was a result of students coming forward with real urgency to make climate justice, the framing of environmental crisis as a human rights issue, a staple of every student's education. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, we're excited to provide the board with an update on Resolution 5272. With us here this evening, Dr. Sarah Davis, our Senior Director of STEAM Education, and the Nicole Berg, who's our Programs Manager for Climate Change and Climate Justice. So they have some important information to share with you, but there has been a good deal of progress, and we'll be the first to recognize there's still continued work to do, and you heard from some folks this evening already. So take it away.
Good evening, Chair Constam, directors, and Superintendent Guerrero. Thank you for having us here this evening. We are also joined here in the room with Nicole and I are Dr. Tanya McKee, Senior Director of Humanities, and with us in spirit are David Martinez, our Social Studies and Ethnic Studies Program Associate, and Susan Holveck, who is our Science Programs Administrator, and she's back east helping her mom with knee surgery. But in the room with us, very excitingly, are youth and community representatives from many different groups who care deeply about the racial equity and social justice implications of climate change, which specifically is climate justice. The plan for curriculum integration we will be showing you this evening was a true collaborative effort, inclusive of student and community voice, supported by Jonathan Garcia, our Chief Engagement Officer, Shanice Clark, Director of Community Engagement, Camille I. Dedevbo from Strategic Partnerships, and Danny Ledesma, Senior Advisor to the Superintendent on Racial Equity and Social Justice. Additionally, Aaron Presberg, Senior Director Manager for Energy and Sustainability, and Monica Flesher, Sustainability Programs Manager in Facilities and Assets Management Department, have also been involved in this process as we consider how through district curriculum we can actually highlight our sustainability work and advance our sustainability work. And so we would really like to thank all of these people for partnering with us in this really important work. So knowledge, empathy, and activism. These are key attributes from the Graduate Portland portrait for students in Portland Public Schools. Knowledge, empathy, and activism. These attributes are core and critical to the work on climate change and climate justice. Our students need the knowledge, not only to understand the problem now and how to minimize our impact, but also the foundational knowledge to advance this work through college and career. Our students demonstrate empathy, seeing not only how climate change is impacting them, but also how it is impacting other communities, most specifically frontline communities. And our students want activism, to express their concern with what is happening in their world and to be part of stopping the damage and engineering solutions. Good evening.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening. Buenas tardes. The last time I spoke to you was on September 23rd, which was my first day on the job. So, Dr. Bird, I feel you. A lot has happened since then. I've been meeting with students, teachers, parents, and community members to gain valuable insights that have informed the work of the Climate Change and Climate Justice Program. We're here tonight excited to share the work plan that has resulted from this engagement process. We'd like to begin by honoring the work of so many dedicated and passionate people in our community who have helped bring climate change and climate justice programs to life in PPS. In April of 2016, the Educating for Climate Justice Collaborative formed and successfully petitioned the school board to pass Resolution 5272, which called for immediate action toward creating comprehensive climate justice education in our school district. Founding members, Bill Bigelow, Tim Swinehart, Jan Zuckerman, Moe Yonamine, Eric Alabarca, Cheryl Lorman, Sheila Golden, Catherine Mueller, and former board director Mike Rosen have helped shepherd the resolution throughout changes in leadership and system shifts. They led a variety of efforts for educators to organize and create climate justice units in classrooms around PPS, and they've also facilitated youth leadership and collaborative spaces, including the Portland Youth Climate Council and the PPS Climate Justice Team. In the Office of Teaching and Learning, the STEAM...
Excuse me just one second.
Do you want us to wait till the very end to ask any questions, or do you want us to...
If we can wait till the end, let's just bookmark. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. In the Office of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Sarah Davis led the team with Dr. Susan Hovek, Jen Scherzinger, Jeff Stonecipher, Kristen Moon, and Dr. Jennifer Mayo to collaborate with educators and redesign all of high school and some elementary school science units to include climate science. And within the Humanities Department, led by Dr. Tanya McKee, David Martinez has also begun coordinated efforts to support climate justice in social studies. Additionally, Kate Yoakum and Rebecca Levinson from ESL partnered with these teams to ensure that English learners are fully supported with language objectives and the scaffolds they may need to advance both their academic and linguistic development. This is a very extensive collaborative effort, and we appreciate this. Despite everyone's best efforts, the students were not seeing the transformation in their curriculum that they expected, and in May of 2019, they returned to the school board to demand a more immediately visible and comprehensive approach to the development of the curriculum. In a bold and visionary move, you, the school board, approved allocation for Climate Change and Climate Justice Programs Manager, and thus began a new era of transformative curriculum in PPS. So this call for transformation was echoed in Superintendent Guerrero's visioning process, through which the community has identified climate change as, quote, one of the most significant challenges facing our world. In service to our graduate portrait, the work of the Climate Change and Climate Justice Programs Manager aligns through two clear pathways, with a tiny little tangent off to the side of one of them. So first of all, students as influential and informed global stewards requires educators as innovative, global, and pragmatic, which requires system support for global stewards and ambassadors, in addition to transformative curriculum and pedagogy is one lane. The second lane is that students as transformative racial equity leaders require educators as racial equity and social justice centered, which require racial equity aligned systems and structures. So there are very clear through lines in terms of our relationship to the work and each of our responsibilities within this. So to approach this work with intentionality and purpose, we gathered as many insights as we could to be grounded in some key concepts. So you'll have in front of you some working definitions of frontline communities, and on the next slide will be climate justice. These are simply meant at the moment to be operating definitions, and through our curriculum development work in collaboration with community, youth, and the adults who serve them, we will be relying on the wisdom of that community to really flesh out a shared understanding of both of these contexts. One part I would like to highlight is this idea of the just transition framework. and thinking about the concept of climate justice as shifting from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And I see this as connected to our practices in education as well. And I'm considering what it might look like for us to shift from transactional practices in education toward more transformational practices in education. And climate justice education and PPS can really offer that space to us through professional collaboration, decolonized curriculum design, community outreach, and reflective practices that decenter us as individuals and support us in moving forward to a common goal. So in order to ensure that we were moving appropriately through our racial equity and social justice lens, we did apply this to our work. And I'll give you there's a full report that, if it has not been shared with you, will be shared with you. We submitted a lot of different documents, but this gives some salient points. As you know, the Racial Equity and Social Justice Lens has 5 different guiding questions, and here are some of the answers to those questions, short answers to those questions.
And just as a note, there are 2 stacks of the RESJ lens on the back row. So if folks are not familiar with it and want to look at it while we're going through this, we didn't embed the questions into the slide deck, and so we have some of those out and about if there are folks here who want to read along on that.
And so we wanted to make sure that because these programs intersect along multiple places in the RESJ framework, and because we want to create a system that will sustain progress through leadership changes and provide a transparent vehicle for accountability, this is the work we've done. First of all, the work of climate change and climate justice does strengthen our universal core for all students, and across science and social studies K-12, it will create universal opportunities for all students to engage in transformative curriculum and pedagogy that supports them in becoming global stewards and ambassadors. This work is the result of extensive community engagement and feedback with intentional efforts to partner with members of frontline communities and frontline serving community organizations. Students, teachers, school and district administrators, parents, community members, public service officials, and community organizers have all offered insights, feedback, and recommendations for collaboration in this process and beyond. And integrating climate change and climate justice into the guaranteed and viable curriculum development process ensures that the units will be accessible to all students in PPS. The proposed action begins to address barriers to equitable outcomes by strengthening core curriculum and offering shared professional learning experiences and relationship building among staff to collaborate in continuous improvement. Data regarding actual implementation of the curriculum can be collected through classroom visits, review of course guides, student course requests, and continuous collaborative professional learning spaces. The last piece is as we continue to assess the capacity and the needs in our system, this plan will need to be a living and dynamic document that's able to respond to the issues that arise through continued engagement. We are still assessing how to best empower youth in this process, not only to inform the curriculum development, but also as co-creators of the continuous improvement in our school community and beyond. So one of our RESJ goals is around student-led initiatives. The proposed Student Climate Justice Advisory Group is a key action to support that goal, and we are currently considering the conditions that may be necessary for our students to really authentically and confidently enter into this type of advisory space. Our goal is to amplify and support youth-led spaces without supplanting their current work, specifically that of organizations that are led by youth of color. An example of this can be found with Yeja's work around the Youth Pass. And so we do have plans to collaborate with the continue collaborating with the Office of Community Engagement and create some outreach and networking events that will happen over the course of February. We are going to try to reach all areas of the city and do some community building events with the youth in these spaces so that we can hear from them, connect them with each other, learn about their work in the community, and bring them all together. We are considering new ideas about what a charter might look like, what expectations might look like for that youth advisory, as well as the guidelines for how we will meaningfully reach out and bring students into the space. So we want to get a little bit more feedback from the youth about what this would look like for them.
So now, the plan. So curriculum development in Portland Public Schools, as we've been creating our guaranteed and viable curriculum documents, has been done through the rigorous curriculum design process. And so what the slide up front is showing you are the three big areas of rigorous curriculum design. And so as we look to do standards-based instruction, the state gives us guidelines for each of our content areas as to what standards should be covered at which grade level. And so our core design teams, which are our PPS educators, facilitated by some TOSAs and administrators, they look at all of the standards for the entire school year, and they really look at the end of this school year, what are the key elements? What's the key knowledge that we want students to walk away with? And those become our priority standards. And then all of the other standards become our supporting standards. Because through most of our standards documents, both state and national, there are frequently more standards than you can cover in depth in a school year. And so we work with our educator teams to really look at, okay, at the end of third grade math, what are the core things that students need to have? At the end of fourth grade language arts, like what are the key things that 3 years from now we want them to remember? And so again, those become our priority standards. Those priority standards are then logically grouped into instructional bundles. What things make sense going together in an instructional unit? And once the standards are grouped in that way, the team then goes, based on our educational history, based on what we know, to cover the standards and to gain knowledge on these things, it should take about this amount of time. And so that is kind of the first phase of rigorous curriculum design. At that phase, it really takes teacher and educator knowledge. And so any teacher in Portland Public Schools who wants to be a part of the full year design teams had the opportunities to volunteer for both science and social studies to participate with the full design teams. But we know that not everybody wants to deal with the curriculum covering the entire year, that some folks are just really passionate about those units dealing specifically with climate change and climate justice. And so then the second effort within rigorous curriculum design, once we know the standards we're going to cover, we've got them grouped, and we know about how much time it's going to take, then we really dig in and we say, if this is what we say we want students to be able to do, what does that look like? And so an assessment, which can be a performance task, it can be a paper, it can be a traditional assessment, but at the end of the day, if our students really have a deep understanding of those standards that we think are critical, what does that understanding look like? And then what are the enduring understandings and what are the essential questions that go with that? This is a second opportunity for members of our broader community to join into the curriculum design process. So, I don't want to go to all 8 of the meetings that have to do with the annual curriculum. I don't want to be out of my class that much. But I'm really passionate about this unit. And so what we will do is we'll do a half day of professional learning for anyone who wants to join at that point, because the core design team is going to have some specific language that they're using and stuff like that. And so we want people to really be able to feel welcome and that they know what's going on and that they can really authentically join. This would be an opportunity for PPS educators who don't necessarily want to be on the core design team, other TOSAs. This is also a place where we can pull in students and our frontline community members to really help, because the enduring understandings, so an example would be one of the kindergarten science standards is to observe that there are patterns in weather. And that is that is the unit that we're going to embed the climate change and climate justice in. Well, I could create an enduring understanding about patterns in weather that had nothing to do with climate change or climate justice, and we felt that that would be a really disingenuous way of collaborating and partnering, and so we want our community members who are deeply knowledgeable, engaged in the climate change and climate justice to help us create those enduring understandings so that it's not just a kindergartner will observe patterns in weather, but that kindergartners can understand that humans impact patterns in weather. And so that is the next place that people can enter. And then the final phase is we have, we've fleshed things out, we know what proficiency looks like, and now we're going to build out the actual daily lessons. And for the climate change and climate justice units, we are in fact going to build them down to daily lesson plans, not to reduce teacher agency, but because not everyone is as knowledgeable about climate change and climate justice as others. And so we want the lessons down to daily lesson plans to be a type of embedded professional development to augment and support the additional professional development that we will give to community members. And at this third place, it's about kind of all of the guardrails are in place to ensure that we are doing these standards-based lessons, that they are available to students across the district. And so we'll look for even wider community engagement at this phase of the curriculum development. And that's why it's been so huge to have Nicole here. She hit the ground running. She has met with so many people. The slide with all of the bubbles, those are all different groups that she's been able to meet with. And so that will be kind of part of her task, is that deep collaboration with social studies and science curriculum leads to be like, okay, the unit development for the climate change, climate justice for 5th grade is coming up. So, so we're now 6 weeks out. So Nicole is going to then be doing that outreach and connecting with people. She's done a lot of work with the students, and for the most part, what the students have told us is, if we want to come in, it's probably going to be at like phase 3. We're more interested in actually the lessons. We don't want to dig into the standards as much. And then what some of the students have told us is we're kind of more excited about the high school elective, and we want to stay in the loop on the K-8 stuff. But but she's really been engaging, and we've been finding these ways that when people want to participate, that they can. And so within our existing curriculum design process, these are kind of the 3 locations where we can invite augmented design team members in to really help have a rich community student embedded lessons created. And so just kind of as an idea for things that have happened already, so within science, the units for 1st, 3rd, and 4th grade are already created. The science team actually got some grants, and so we've been able to work with collaborators to create those, and they're in implementation and review. And I do want to highlight, it's been a really exciting collaboration with the ESL team. For folks who were here 2 years ago, I kind of was talking about that the FOSS kits were 22 years old. And so the science team kind of got together and were like, we get that there are other priorities, but we can't live any longer without having elementary science aligned with NGSS. And then we were having conversations with ESL, and we kind of came up with our own slogan, which is everyone's a language learner in science. And so we have embedded the ESL ELP standards in with the science, and so all of these units have been co-created, and they cover the science standards and they cover the ELD standards as well. And so that's been really exciting. And then at our high school level, as Dr. Valentino alluded to, the high school science redesign started 3 years ago. It's part of a very large regional collaborative. But the exciting news we got recently from the Director of Standards and Instructional Supports from ODE, that New Jersey, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Illinois Department of Education curricular people have been reaching out because ours is the only high school sequence in the nation that builds across 3 years and was centered in equity. And so we now have states from around the country reaching out to us and asking us to share what we've been doing in terms of our high school science. And this was one of the really cool, Trioth and Rachel, who were on part of the original Climate Change, Climate Justice Committee. I was like 2 months here at PPS, and I was at some meeting with Trioth, and he was like, well, if we're redesigning high school science, couldn't we embed some climate change, climate justice? And we were like, yeah, we can. And so that collaboration started early, and that is part of this work that's also getting national recognition. And so currently over a third of the students in Oregon receive this curriculum. So this work that we are doing and pioneering is already being shared across the state. Social studies is a little farther behind simply because the Oregon standards have not been approved yet. We have fingers crossed and high hopes and expectations that it will be May of this year. And we have early drafts of the standards, so work has been moving forward, but it will have to be mindful and reflective of if there are some edits from what we have been working on so far. And then in terms of youth leadership, Nicole, as she alluded, we had really hoped to have that advisory panel up and running by now. But what we discovered is there were so many different youth climate change, climate justice groups across our different high schools that we were actually going to be co-opting the work that they had already started, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to be super respectful, and so we want to find a way to have a student advisory panel that amplifies and enhances their work and doesn't take away the agency that they've worked so hard to create. And so we were a little bit behind on where we thought we would be, but intentionally because we stopped ourselves because we didn't want to step on work that students were doing. And so this is just kind of an overview of the current climate change units that are happening in science. Then the climate justice units are also going to be developed with the social studies standards. We're also looking to see if we can find overlap with the new SB 13. And there is deep integration with the released ethnic studies, but the ethnic studies standards, tell me if I get this right, Tanya, ethnic studies is now being embedded across social studies, and that's one of the reasons that the standards are delayed. Yay, I didn't make it up. And then additional work that the social studies team is doing is also the new Senate bill related to genocide and Holocaust education. And so in terms of social sciences, climate justice units, these are some places that the core design team is already seeing resonance and overlap where climate change and climate justice units could be built in.
So other opportunities for youth and community engagement have come up in many conversations with youth. And so we want to think very intentionally as well that in addition to the youth summits, we know there are multiple community events in planning processes right now. And we want to figure out how to support that and amplify it. There is like job shadowing that we could build into this curriculum. We could do coaching, we could do peer mentoring, collaborative school improvement projects. I mean, this is just a small list of some of the more resounding asks that the students have wanted to see in the curriculum. So we will be making sure that we're partnering with all of these different people in the community to make these a reality for our youth through the curriculum development process. And then moving forward, we will have, by June, we're going to get this advisory created. We'll be meeting. The units will begin development. Science will begin this spring. We have some days tucked aside. The elective can begin development this summer, and the K-12 social studies work will happen in the fall. So that by the end of this next school year, in anticipation of 2022, we should have everything done and implemented into classrooms.
Thank you. That's a lot. I would like to encourage you guys to have some students come back and talk to us about what they're doing in the classroom and what this really looks like. Any board questions or board discussion? You were holding your questions, Julia. That was quite an exercise.
Which slide? I'll just run through it pretty quick. Just the historical context?
Yes.
Thank you. Tag team. Historical context, just, it seems like it would be worth adding the Climate Justice Committee to the timeline since they've been a critical player in the work. Then I'm going to go to the slide that is titled well, just another comment. The student slide, I love the students being co-creators. To my questions, the slide that's the climate change and climate justice implementation plan, it's after the super complicated chart, which I think you did a great job explaining. So to better support students in all schools and all classrooms, what is it in terms of materials? I know there's been a textbooks review, but in order to integrate all of this into sort of daily classroom activities, what sorts of kits, supplemental materials are needed so that it's not we'd like to do that, or we have the curriculum, but we don't have X. What's the X that's needed? So we can think about that as we move ahead.
So our historic science kits, there have never been enough of them for every teacher in the district to be teaching science at the same time. So say we wanted every third grade teacher the sixth grade into the school year to teach a specific science lesson, we don't have enough kits that we could then provide them. And so our science kits are actually on a library checkout system. There are 3 kits per grade level, and science is woven in with social studies and health, kind of in a rotating basis across the school day. And so for the curricular materials that we're writing ourselves, we are following somewhat that same model, because there's a number of system and infrastructure asks that would have to come into place for us to do that. And so if we wanted to see a situation where potentially the social studies unit would immediately flow into the science unit across all of our schools, we would need to get to a point where all of our teachers that we had enough science kits for all of the teachers at a particular grade level. And so that would be something to kind of aspire to moving toward the future.
So just to clarify, the 3 kits per grade level, that's across the district?
Sorry. So across the I'm just going to stick with third grade. Across the third grade school year, there would be 3 different science units that would be covered. For each of those units, we have about 60 kits, but we have about 150 teachers at each grade level. And so the way we deal with that now is that as teachers or educators are putting their schedules together, some of them might choose to do it in the 4th week, and some might choose to do it in the 10th week, and some might choose to do the 3rd kit first, because they're kind of standalone. They don't build, and that design also forces it that our science units at the elementary level in many ways can't build, because we don't know what order people are going to be getting them. It's still exciting that teachers are requesting the kits and they're doing science, and we've gotten really good reception for the newly created activities. And so, but if we did want to get to that place where we kind of knew at a specific time that people were going to be doing stuff, then we would need to expand that. Social studies is also looking, because the standards have so radically changed. Social studies will also be looking at needing curricular materials to support the guaranteed and viable curriculum. Some of those will be curated first source documents, but also there will need to be some there as well.
And just to clarify, and this is my last question, just to clarify on the textbook piece, I understand there's been a review. We don't have any climate denying materials in our textbooks, correct?
I believe that is correct. I know, but what we also did not have was the human impact on climate being explicitly mentioned in our textbooks. And so that has been one of the things that we've really been working to curate auxiliary and supplemental materials, again, sometimes from first source and newspaper articles and things like that, and sometimes from identifying some standalone curricular materials that we can then augment our system with.
So the supplemental materials, are those ones that we now have, or that it's a budget ask, or?
So it would be a little bit of both. So in terms of science, we have actually really intentionally focused on open source materials, and we found some really excellent things. There are in fact a number of really interesting curricular options out there that are open source. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily free, because you also need to have professional development. But we've been able to kind of curate from open source the things to augment what we were doing in science. And so for those, they are available. I don't want to speak for humanities related to advocating or putting to the side a budget ask. I'm going to think she wants money.
Just, this is really exciting. So thank you for the great work. Looking forward to see how it progresses going forward. And it's nice to be seen as a national leader in curriculum development. This is a great place to see it. I mean, when I first heard the phrase, "the world is on fire," it's like, oh yeah, great metaphor, except not. And we could put a screen of flames going on, and well, is that Australia? Is that Brazil? Is that the Columbia Gorge? Is that California? So that we're past time to take action.
Director Moore?
Just a quick question, or a couple questions, about the opportunities for youth community engagement. Are we looking at maybe trying to build this into the CTE strands too, and try to get some internships going? And
That Camille has been really amazing at organizing some cross-functional team meetings, and we're beginning that exploration. So while it's not necessarily in this body of work at the moment, there are certainly opportunities for it, and the youth, they really want that. So I'm hopeful that we can make that a reality.
Well, and also not just building internship opportunities, but really having a mind toward developing CTE strands in sustainable industries.
Yes.
Yeah. And this isn't a classical CTE strand, but politics is a growth industry.
Sure.
And I think especially like NGOs around climate change and advocacy, and city governments getting involved in climate change. It would be great to, okay, so I'm a social studies politics person, so it would be great to see that kind of thrown into the mix here too.
Absolutely, yes. I've met with a few people in the mayor's office and at Metro and some other government bodies that are very excited to partner with the students. Great. So yeah.
And I also think, as kind of bringing together a couple of strands, former Director Rosen's, look forward to seeing a draft policy to update our sustainability work. I've talked to a number of community partners who are frothing at the mouth to jump in and partner with us around energy efficiency projects, for example. And I think that's a great place to engage students in, both as a policy piece and as a CTE kind of a bit of that going on as well. And it'll save us money. How about that?
Well, that's a really important aspect of our bond-funded modernization projects, that with every new school we build, they're 21st century LEED platinum or LEED certified, sustainable buildings, and it's just sustainable construction practices and all that. So that's an aspect of that work that we don't talk about a lot.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Really
Thank you.
exciting. Thank you so much. Okay, Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this next item, authorizing a modification to the Lincoln High School Master Plan?
We're going to have our Chief Operating Officer, Dan Young, talk a little bit about the substance of this proposed modification and potentially some support from our Chief of Student Support Services, Brenda Martinick. If there's further questions, I also want to recognize we have our Lincoln High principal, Peyton Chapman, here with us this evening, and another one of our principals. Thank you, Ms. Calvert, for being here, I think for moral support maybe. Dan Young.
Good evening, directors and superintendent. In your packets tonight, you have a staff report and a board resolution proposing to modify the Lincoln Modernization Project. Quick background, PPS has adopted education specifications for comprehensive high schools, and in that includes space for partner health clinics. The Lincoln High School Master Plan was approved in August 2018, and that included space for a partner health clinic as well. Since that time, the availability of healthcare providers in the area has changed. Lincoln currently does not have a health clinic in the school now, and staff no longer thinks that we would be able to procure a provider if we went out for an RFP. So because of that situation, we are proposing to change the Lincoln Modernization Project to remove the health clinic, which is what the resolution states. And staff, when we originally took a look at this and had thought about this for a while, we had proposed adding a construction CTE space, because in the CTE plan, that is what is proposed for Lincoln in the future. However, we want to acknowledge that there are other potential options in there. So that's not specifically written into the resolution. The removal of the clinic is what's written in there. So that is what we have right now. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Introduce the item and continue to discussion. The board will now consider Resolution 6042, authorizing modification to Lincoln High School Modernization Master Plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Director Bailey moves. Do I have a second? Second. Director Moore seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 6042. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Is there any additional board discussion on this resolution?
I'd be really interested in hearing what Maxine has to say from a student perspective around accessing health and her feedback on this.
I do have feedback on this. Not like, I mean, I have feedback, but also like we have student feedback because we talked about it for a chunk of time today at District Student Council. One of our representatives obviously goes to Lincoln, and he said that students at Lincoln didn't even know that this was being proposed just because their health center is, like, it's not currently a health center, it's more of like a nurse station and mental health center. But also that students and staff like aren't really concerned about the health center right now because, you know, based on where Lincoln is and the population of that school, a lot of students are covered with insurance from a private healthcare provider. And so what he said is that a lot of students right now are thinking that the CTE programming space would be better just because based on the space right now at Lincoln, like they're already set to outgrow that modernization plan, which I don't know if that's completely true. That's just what I've been told. So currently, like, some students are thinking that that CTE space would be better, and that there are other healthcare options in the area, but also it doesn't consider for the future. Like, it seems unlikely that in the future the population of Lincoln will change, but we never know. And a lot of students, at least at like my health center at Franklin, use that for contraceptives as a safe way to get those, and what the future of that will be at Lincoln. And we have on this side of the river, we have health centers at multiple schools, but we don't have one on the west side currently, and that we have Lincoln and Wilson over there. So if we don't end up having one at Lincoln, maybe thinking about having one at Wilson, because then there would be something for the students on the west side. Okay, that's all.
Oh, that's really helpful. Any further discussion?
I'm curious about, with the ed specs, what other, student representative Latterell talked about other things that were in place, like the nurse station, mental health services, counseling. What are currently planned for Lincoln? If this space is removed, what other sorts of supports will students have?
It will have the other, I guess, gamut of other supports that are in there. I might invite our senior project manager, Eric Girding, who's in the audience. He can come and speak to some more specifics that are one of the plans, a little more familiar than I am. But the counseling center is there and other wraparound services.
Nurse.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, my name's Eric Girding. I'm the senior project manager with the Office of School Modernization for the Bond program. Regarding the ed specs and what the building would still have if the health clinic was not part of the program, there is the nurses suite, which exists currently, but is expanded a bit in the ed spec requirements as far as just the regular sort of daily health needs that students have and related to athletics, injuries and things like that. We still have that service with the nurse and that program. And then there is the counseling center, which has the mental health counselors, psychologists, and other wraparound service providers that can provide health care in the form of behavioral health support, which has in our sort of work with the stakeholders in the community is seen as that is in the greatest need for students. So that will still be in the program.
Thank you.
So just to follow up, so what services would not be available without a health clinic?
It would be the services that a third-party independent healthcare provider would bring, similar to what we have at our other schools. The healthcare providers we have at other schools, we have 2 Multnomah County clinics, and they bring just sort of general care to those clinics. But we're unable to have Multnomah County move into new schools, and they actually moved out of Grant, as we know. So it would just be that kind of initial sort of general primary care.
So are some, sorry, these are sort of general questions. Sure. For the other health clinics that we have, do students use them as primary care facilities? I mean, is that where they're getting primary care?
I think we'll defer to our chief of school supports, Brenda.
Can we have
here,
Ms. Marnick
still here to give some details.
programmatically?
She's nodding emphatically from the back.
Good evening. So our healthcare clinics, our school-based health clinics, provide a variety of services. For some students, that is their primary care.
Okay. And how much of that is dependent on a provider rather than a space? Because some primary care, immunizations, you probably don't really need a full-on health center to do that. So I guess
there's a variety of health services that are provided there, from providing contraceptives to sore throat pain, to immunizations, to a cold. So there's a variety of things that students go to our health clinics for. For students who are on Oregon Health Plan, a lot of them use that as their primary provider, but the health clinics will refer them on to a primary physician should they need ongoing medical attention or prescription medication, like an antibiotic or something like that. So they do refer on, but for many of our students, child checks, our physicals for sports, and then colds, flus, sore ankles, things like that, that will go to the health clinic for. One of the issues that we're coming across, and we're experiencing this with Grant right now, is we have opened up an RFP twice now, and we have not had providers that have sought out the RFP, so we currently have a space at Grant. that does not have a health clinic. And we have been told that due to the reduced number of students on the Oregon Health Plan, that it would be really hard for providers to come because it's just, it doesn't even break even through the Oregon Health Plan. So that's what we have been told with Lincoln as well, is a similar situation.
I think it's really important to frame it that way, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, I'll speak for myself. This is not a decision about whether we want a health clinic at Lincoln or whether we think a health clinic is needed. This is a decision that we cannot find a provider
That's correct.
To fill Grant, and we're pretty sure we won't be able to find a provider to fill Lincoln. So it really is more of an operational issue rather than a policy or ed specs. It's like, if we can't find a provider, should we be building a space that will just remain empty?
Correct.
We discussed this a little bit in the bond committee because I pushed a little bit on, like, are there not more creative ways? Are there not other providers? Can we bring in someone besides Multnomah County Health Clinics? And the answer really is no. Someone's got to make a profit to be in there if it's not going to be Multnomah County.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I do want to state, though, that Lincoln High School has a higher percentage of students who experience different levels of anxiety, suicide ideation, mental health concerns, depression. So there's a number of students, it's a higher percentage there. So using some of that space or some sort of configuration to increase mental health supports would definitely serve the community well.
That would be great to see if there are any opportunities for modification to the counseling center or the nurse's suite or whatever to address those concerns.
Chair Constam, I'd like to offer an amendment just along to the resolution along those lines. And I'll say what the amendment is and then share my thinking about it. That to drop the last in the resolve, drop the last 5 words of number 1, which is remove the planned health clinic, and put in its place, replace the health clinic with an alternative proposed flexible space for health services delivery.
Second.
So let me just speak to the amendment. So I've been a parent of a high school student who's been in a high school that's had a health clinic and one that has not. And I really strongly believe that the district made the right decision when they set the ed specs and put that in the ed specs because there's not a neighborhood in this city where kids don't need some sort. It may look different, and who pays the bill may look different, but I believe that no matter what neighborhood, there's a need for it. And I go back to this concept similar to the conversation we had the other day, and I'm seeing the Jefferson Principal Calvert out there when the question was, why are we building Jefferson for a certain size? And the part of the answer was, we're building 100-year schools. And it may be that we're at a moment in time in which the healthcare system looks one way, or to Maxine's point, that the student population looks shows up one way, or that people are having their health care, students are having their health care paid for in a particular way, but that's just the moment of time. And I think if we remove this ed spec and don't replace it with something, again, recognizing the current difficulty, but don't replace it with something that provides an alternative or some flexibility in the future, that we will close off an option. And I really see the value of students in their own school having the opportunity to receive those services. So, for example, while I think Wilson should have a health clinic too, or some sort of flexible space, but I don't think we can depend on Lincoln students being able to drive, not all kids have cars, drive to a different school, nor maybe necessarily feel comfortable to go to a different school to get those services. I also look at the focus of the Student Success Act and how this sort of the wraparound services are really being focused on as ways to help our students be successful in the classroom, and the importance of that. So I think by maintaining the flexibility, and it may look different for Lincoln, or may look different in 2025 than it does in 2030, but that we keep that flexibility so the students get support.
I think one thing that's interesting about the situation at Grant is that the specifications for the health centers are very different than classroom space or other flexible spaces that we have in our high schools. So as I understand it, the way that the health center is configured right now at Grant, sitting empty, is very difficult to repurpose for our students' needs, and they're hurting for classroom space with the over-enrollment at Grant. So it is an unused space, as it would be at Lincoln High School, given that there are no providers coming forward. So I think it's true, we always have to keep in mind that the landscape is changing, and that at some point in the future, we may have to reconsider whether there's a way to repurpose some space within our high schools if that becomes a dire need and our students are unable to be served other places in the community. But I had lengthy conversations with Vanetta Abdul-Talif, who ran the health services for Multnomah County, just to get a better understanding of the landscape. And, I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, they pulled out of all of our PPS middle schools, or they were at George, Harrison Park, Cesar Chavez, and Lane. And then has really been a value-based budget decision by the county, for which we should be very grateful and explicitly grateful that they have continued their operations in our high schools now, because they do it at a significant annual loss, but they consider it an important part of their mission. But we can't count on even that forever. And she made it very clear that there was no possibility that the county would step forward for Grant or for Lincoln. And the private landscape is even more certain that it just doesn't work for them. But the flip side of that, which is really reassuring, is that it's relatively easy for all of our students now to access these services in the community, that there are very few, like she said, virtually no citizens of or kids in our community under 18 who aren't covered by the Oregon Health Plan or some kind of private insurance now. We have really, really closed that gap. And so that's the good part. And when we first started school-based health clinics, that wasn't the case. So they were the only place where kids, particularly uninsured kids, could get health care, which was hugely important. And now we have a different landscape. So I think it's important for us to partner with the county and with the private sector to make sure that our nurses and our counseling centers are able to provide information to students and families about where they can get services. But I think it's pretty clear that even if it were our intention to offer this as a wraparound service for our students, we're not the direct service providers, and the direct service providers aren't there.
I have a couple specific questions on the amendment. It's on the table, right?
Yes.
It was motion moved and
Yes.
seconded.
Yes.
I guess the question I have is both to Director Brim Edwards, but also to staff, in terms of the language of replacing it with an alternate site for healthcare activities. Do we have a sense of what that might look like? Because what I'm concerned about is this: I want the health clinic, and if we had a way to get it, I would say absolutely no to this resolution. But we don't have that. The language as it currently says remove the health clinic. It doesn't say, as you pointed out, Dan, it doesn't say replace it with anything. We can sort of work through that process. There are some proposals, in the staff report about replacing with CTE space. I'm worried if we do this, we again are limiting the use of the space and how we build it. And if we don't know what it looks like to fill it, then I'm not sure. I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I guess one thing, just as it might be hard to change a space that's built for it to classrooms, conversely, it's hard to go the other way.
Is it? Do we know that?
Well, I'm just saying what Director
No,
Constance said.
I'm imagining, and I'll turn it over
Yeah.
to the facilities people, that when you build a health clinic, you're building smaller spaces with exam rooms, et cetera. When you have an open space, you can fill that much easier than you can tear stuff
So,
out.
so
But
the thinking
I'm
is
beyond my pay grade and facilities
And again,
work, so.
I don't think we should get caught in the, who the president of the United States is could very much depend on. The next president of the United States is could very much depend on what the healthcare system looks like, and so to. I think just remove the health clinic without leaving flexibility for some sorts of services, whether it's contracting with MESD for some services. But I don't actually think it's easy for students to access them somewhere else, because if you don't
I don't think so either.
Well, I'm just saying, if you don't have a car, if you're leaving site, I'm speaking from my parent experience.
No, I know. I'm in total agreement with you.
Okay.
The question here isn't whether they can or can't access it. It's can we fill the space that we build? And I don't want to build space that we can't fill.
So can I offer a friendly amendment? Because I'm right with you, and say instead of saying do this, explore this as a priority. I don't want, as a board member, I don't want to get into designating a space in a school to be X in that sense when we don't know what exactly that's going to look like.
And I think that's my concern about the CTE is that I know that was just one of the proposed ideas in the proposal we received, but I really think, the idea of a 100-year school, we don't know what's going to happen. And so how do we allow the flexibility for future boards when we have, let's say, universal health care and need students to have that access in schools?
I was accused of being a dreamer. So I do want to say editorially, we have the most screwed up, wasteful healthcare system.
Okay, we could spend all night on that, Scott.
Yeah. I'll just stop there. Medicare for all.
And how does that fit with our board goals?
Equity, cost savings that could be spent on addressing,
So getting back to the amendment.
Getting back to the amendment. Can we take it as an advisory to explore that? We have good people on the ground in the Lincoln community that can be part of that process, and I think that's not a board. I mean, we have indicated our support for whatever kind of health services we can get in our schools. We know that's important. We don't know what's even possible, depending a lot on, are there providers who can actually do that? What does that cost? All those kind of things.
That's why I tried to leave the resolution somewhat broad, or the amendment, the flexible space for health services delivery, that it wasn't locked into a clinic, capital H, capital C, but that you could have additional discussions. I know that, again, I had a student at Lincoln where there wasn't a healthcare clinic, and I had a student at Cleveland, and where there was a healthcare clinic, and I do think all students utilize the health clinic, and that to say that today's student it's hard enough to be a low-income student at Lincoln without having an additional, you have to go somewhere else to get it, or you get and I know this is all contingent about being able to get a provider, but I think we should ask Brenda and team, this is less a facilities decision, and is there like an alternative model? So I'll trust that we can't, for the traditional model, get a healthcare clinic, but that there may be other models that we're able to provide those same services.
So I'm agreeing with the spirit of what you're saying, but if we say, this is what you need to use that space for, and you guys do your best, and it just doesn't happen, then they have to come back for another board action. And I don't want to have us go through that. I want to just say, that's the board's first priority would be to use that space for some kind of health services, but you guys, do what you can. Best judgment.
Related to this motion, if I could ask Mr. Young, could you say a little bit more about some of the enhanced space for health and wellness to be made available to our students? And certainly that could be augmented, but I imagine this is a topic that the design advisory group also took up, and what was the thinking from that group? And given where this would be proposed to be, were there any other restrictions for use of that first floor?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll let Eric jump in if he's got some more detail. So the project team and the Lincoln Steering Committee, which is largely internal staff and a representation of leadership across the district, including the principal, and there's board membership and all the steering teams, had an idea, partially because of Grant, that the health clinic space might not be occupied. So they've been looking for probably close to a year of what those other options might be there, and weren't specifically looking for a different health provider space. So I'll just say that right there. And so that's where the construction CTE option seemed to rise to the top from the project team and from the steering committee, because that is part of the CTE plan for Lincoln in the future. And it is in a very convenient space next to the makerspace across from the theater and those kind of things. So from that perspective, with the total open field, that's what rose to the top. If we are looking for a more confined use of that space for health services, we'll need to, I think, take a fresh look at what could best be done there. And I don't want to create a false sense of urgency, but the project isn't designed, isn't permitting. We have broken ground. So we will need to make decisions relatively quickly.
It's not a false sense of urgency, it's a real sense of urgency.
Hey, I have
Did
a
you
question.
say that it's in
okay,
permitting
you go
already?
first. No, you go first. No, you go first.
Did you say that the drawings are already in permitting?
Yes, I'm not sure, Eric, where we are with our permits. We're in our construction documents.
Yeah, we're just about to receive our foundations and structural permit, and then our overall building permit will be submitted probably next week. Yeah.
Okay, can I ask
Maxine?
a question? 2 questions. 1, is there a student on the DAG for Lincoln, and who is it? And 2, were any students who would have, like possibly low-income students at Lincoln who may have used the health center in the future for what, the services that Brenda listed, asked about this? Because that's where I see a lot of issues. Like, we can have debate about this all we want, but at the end of the day, it's like, this is going to be affecting the students. And, I only heard about it, yesterday, and I didn't really have time to ask anyone. So just wondering those 2 questions.
Your point is really well taken about there should have been more outreach to the Lincoln community about this. There were at least 4 students on the DAG from very diverse backgrounds, I would say. I think the question is, if we want to contemplate whether we want to be somehow in the direct services business for health services, that's a budget question. We don't have a direct service provider to run a health clinic at Lincoln. We don't foresee having one. This is a very highly specific design for this particular space. Did you want to add anything, Dan? What was the other part of your question that didn't get answered?
Just why more student input wasn't taken into account before we brought this here to the board.
I think it was just included in the, perhaps Principal Chapman wants to comment on this. This was a subject of considerable conversation in the Lincoln Design Advisory Group.
I just want to say, one of the models is not a direct service model, but MESD provides services to lots of other districts. We traditionally have had a different relationship with MESD because we provide so many services, but lots of other districts contract with MESD to provide services. So I think what the point of the amendment is to look at some different models.
Do they do health clinics?
I'm not aware that they're running full health clinics. I think certainly we access them for nursing, and they would be interested in a conversation on what that looks like to be slightly enhanced. But Principal Chapman can certainly speak to how the space might continue to accommodate partners like Western Psychological and others that students might be accessing on the campus already. Principal Chapman?
Yep. So, for the first few years, obviously, we want every school to have a health clinic. That was the approach we took. Every school has students who need health clinic. But it really became apparent with the grant process that there was not going to be a provider. We reached out to alumni who are in the healthcare services. We reached out to parents who are private providers. We talked to people, in a lot of different places, and got the same response that the grant community was getting, that there wasn't going to be a provider available for Lincoln. We then did an extensive request to map all the other providers within a 1 mile zone. So Outside In was mentioned, the Time Zoom Care, also the Good Sam, and a variety of other providers in the area. And then we brought our school nurse in also to get her perspective. And we did need a larger space than she has now, because right now she's right next to school police and athletics, and it's not welcoming, it's not confidential. But the new space that's designed will have more room and offices for partners like Western Psychological Services. And I have been a champion for every school having a full-time school psychologist and more wraparound services. We now have a licensed clinical social worker, and our new space will have a very welcoming counseling center with private areas, a quiet room, and then places for our offices for Western Psychological Services partners, our nurse. It's a much better, much more beautiful. I think the voters and taxpayers will be very happy with the new space. Because the truth is we just don't anticipate being able to get a provider. But we do have talked at Site Council, the DAG, and with all of our students, and reviewed all of the successful school survey results. And our students will say that mental health is a top priority, that we really need to continue to seek out those partnerships. We really do need a full-time school psychologist. We really do need to take mental health, suicide prevention, anxiety, depression. I will say the other thing the successful school surveys fleshed out for us was that students feel like it's a very highly academic school, and they don't understand why we have the least amount of CTE programs. So we really do need more CTE programs. The students are telling us they need to do things with their hands and hands-on learning, and then that reduces stress and anxiety. And the CTE technical ed construction space would do that. It's also on the first floor. The city center rules require that that's an active streetscape. We would not want to put a student wellness center there. There would be no privacy. So the CTE space on the first floor was discussed by the DAG, by Site Council, and takes into account the student feedback from the successful and parent feedback from the successful school survey, and from those conversations. So at this point, I think our community would be really devastated to lose that hands-on space. And I am worried about the fact that we're in the permitting process now, and any delays would be very costly. And we don't want any more delays.
Okay, I'd like to call the question, please, on the amendment that is on the table. Director Byrne-Edwards, could you please read the amendment again?
That we strike the words "to remove the planned health clinic" and replace it with, replace the health clinic with an alternative proposed flexible space for health service delivery.
Okay, all in favor of this?
Can we do any more board discussion?
On the amendment
Yeah.
in particular? Yes.
So I'm going to oppose the amendment, and I'm going to say again for the record, I want a health clinic at Lincoln, and if we had a provider, I would be pushing very hard for it. I am not opposed at all to asking staff to explore continued, alternative healthcare delivery systems, if that's a possibility. I think the language as proposed is still very restrictive and would lock us into providing healthcare services in this space. So I'm much more comfortable leaving the flexibility, and you've gotten a sense from me at least that I'd like to see more exploration, but it's also good to hear that we have been exploring at Grant those options and really so far haven't found anything. So,
Director Bailey, you said you had a friendly amendment. Was it an amendment to this language, or was it an alternative?
It was basically what Andrew said. You've got a sense from the board to continue exploring, but no mandate.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
The amendment fails by a vote of 5-2 with student representative Lateral voting.
I don't know.
That's okay. You can
Okay.
abstain.
I want to abstain then.
Okay,
please.
and your point is very well taken about the lack of engagement with Lincoln students on this issue. The resolution before us reads, the board directs the superintendent or his we've already moved the resolution itself. So all in favor of the underlying resolution, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
All opposed, please
No.
indicate by saying no. I heard one no. The resolution passes by a vote of 6-1. Any abstentions? And student lateral voting. You can do whatever you want. Okay, abstaining. Yes, okay. Thank you, and thank you for raising the issue through the DSC. All right, on to board and committee and conference reports. Director Moore, would you like to provide an update from the policy committee? Do you have an update from the policy committee? Even if you wouldn't like to.
We are working on finalizing a revision to the meals policy, meals, beverages, and gifts policy that was mentioned in the Secretary of State audit. And we spent our last committee meeting essentially talking about that. We got a very, very brief update on the anticipated timeline for enrollment for the work around revising policies related to enrollment balancing. And our next meeting is scheduled for February 10th. That sounds right. We do have on the books a meeting for January 27th, but we have canceled that. What's happening right now around the enrollment-related policies is a significant amount of engagement with various communities to kind of build on the work that has been done in the past for many years in both SACIT and DBRAC processes, and we're looking to, since DBRAC ended, 3 years ago now? We're looking to kind of make sure that we are up to date on community opinions about any proposed changes. So there you go.
Director Moore, your colleagues on the policy committee are confused about when the next meeting is. Is the one on the 27th really canceled? Because I did not know that. Oh, it's not out yet.
It's not out yet.
My magic phone told me I still had a meeting, so, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Of course. I'm going home now.
Good night, Maxine.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
I appreciate it.
Let us know if we can take any for you.
I don't have any tests, so I'm good. But thank you. If you want to finish writing my AP English paper for me, I would appreciate it.
What's it about?
Absolutely.
No, it's about the book Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee.
Loved it.
She came to Franklin. It was really good. Highly recommend the book. But I'm writing my paper about that book because that's what I'm required to do.
Did you hear yourselves on Think Out Loud?
Yes.
That was
My
fantastic.
parents were listening.
That's
And
fantastic.
my friend Flora, her mom is the librarian at Grant and tweeted about it and made all of her students listen to it. So hopefully other students listen to it too.
When she gave her address to the packed house at the Schnitz, she said it was the favorite part of her day by far, talking with the Franklin students.
That makes my heart happy.
Good night. Director Scott.
Yes. School Modernization Bond Committee. We had a meeting last week, very good meeting. I'll start at the end and work backwards to where we're going. We got presentations on the Jefferson, Wilson, and Cleveland master planning processes and what those communities were really excited for and looking for in their schools, which was great. We opened the meeting with a discussion of the communications and engagement plan around the 2020 bond and the criteria and priorities discussion around the 2020 bond as well. And one of the things that came out of that was that there was some board desire to have another discussion about the criteria that are being used to form the 2020 bond. And so we are scheduled to meet on February 13th for an all-board discussion. So it was a committee meeting, now it's an all-board discussion on the 13th to talk about the criteria. My plan is that we will send out, the staff will send out to the entire board the existing criteria, long-range facilities plan and other criteria that have been used in 2012 and 2017. And I'm going to ask board members to come to that February 13th meeting with specific concrete changes that they want to see in that criteria. We don't really have time either at that meeting or just from a planning process to do a whole lot of brainstorming. I think we're starting off with a really good base, and I just want board members to come if you've got things that are missing or things that that you want to strike that with concrete changes, and we'll have that discussion and make some decisions and then move on.
Can you tell us what part of town that'll be in, or where what the location is?
Yes, that will be here at 4:30, I believe. But Roseanne will clarify
Okay.
all those things for us.
Great. Director Lowry, do you have an update from the Charter and Alternative Programs Committee?
I do. We had a lovely meeting with lots of our community-based organizations in attendance and several of our charter schools last week. And we are beginning our big process as a charter committee of visiting our schools that are up for renewals and contract extensions. And we will begin our hearing process on that same night, Director Scott. So I'm hoping that you efficiently manage our time so that we can get to our charter.
We will finish on time.
Yes, charter hearing that night. So it's a great opportunity to see what some of our charter schools are doing, and we are working with our CBOs to talk about equity funding and how the Student Success Act will influence them, as well as following the statute when it comes to our charter schools. So that's what we're doing on the Charter and Alternatives Program team.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Director
Just
Bailey.
want to say, for those of you interested in that whole cluster of issues that we subsume under enrollment balancing, we will have at our February 4th board meeting, we will have, part of the meeting will be a work session on that topic. So come one, come all, tune in to see where we are in that process.
Director Brim-Edwards, do you have a report from the Audit Committee?
Actually, I thought I was going to be giving a report from the Multiple Pathways to Graduation.
That too. I believe the Audit Committee hasn't met.
So we have an upcoming meeting of
thank
the Audit Committee. Should I go ahead with the Multiple Pathways to Graduation Design Advisory Group? So it had a meeting on January 9th, and this is the building that encompasses the new structure that's going to be on the Benson campus and the Pioneer High School, Portland Evening and Portland Summer Scholars, Portland Virtual Scholars, Alliance High School, Reconnection Centers, Dart Clinton School. So that's the collective plus the Portland International Scholars. And the group had toured, they toured Grant because that's where the building was, just to get some inspiration of what a new modern facility might look like, although theirs is obviously going to be for a smaller student population. They also had visited the Woodburn Success High School, and which has a similar set of alternative programs. In the meeting, they went through the guiding principles, site layouts, what from a staff perspective, what sort of adjacencies would be beneficial to the students. They also talked about learning community adjacencies, so that was most of the evening. One thing that's relevant for the board is that when we passed Resolution 5828, which is the resolution to cite it there, we did not specifically include, I believe it's the teen parent administrative offices. So currently they would be the only entity still left at Alliance at Meek. So we just need a small language change. It was an oversight apparently, but it they need clarity because obviously they're getting to the design stage, and whether they need that they need to allocate that space, which is clear they will, unless we're just going to leave them by themselves Alliance for Meek. So that, some language will be coming to the board at some point to just clarify that.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? All right, thank you, everyone. Good evening, and we are adjourned.